I suppose you never really know what's going to happen, but there's no point in worrying about future problems either. I don't like to dwell too much on the past or feel too sorry for myself. I think it's important to look forward to what's coming in the future. My name is Moya. I'm 17, I live in Trim, and I'm in 5th year in school. In my free time, I like to go for walks with my dog, and I like cycling and definitely swimming. I like swimming because of the physical side of it. I find it very rewarding, and it's great to keep up my strength in my back and in my hips, particularly in the last few years. When I was in 6th class, my mum would have noticed me walking down from school limping. I remember I went on a walk on Bettystown Beach with my family, and I wasn't able to keep up with them at all. A few days later, my friend invited me to go to Winter Wonderland, and I was really excited. I remember we were getting off a ride and I kind of caught my leg in the door of one of the cars, and I felt kind of a pull, and I knew then, after all that limping, after this, there was definitely something not right. I was taken to Crumlin and we were waiting, I think, for about 7 hours. We were told that I had a SUFI of the hip, and basically what that means is that the femur falls out of the ball and socket joint of the hip.
It normally has a gradual onset, so you mightn't actually notice it. It can happen for various reasons. It's normally during a growth spurt, and in Moya's case we found out afterwards during her hospital admission that she had hypothyroidism, so that left her more susceptible to it.
In the operation the next day, they put in 2 screws into my hip to put it back into place.
She was kept in hospital for a week after the surgery, and she was discharged home then. She was still in an awful lot of pain, and it's very unlike Moya to complain. She's a very high pain threshold, but it was a very difficult situation for her. You know, it was, as I said, extensive surgery, so she was very uncomfortable and not able to walk unaided, and but she was delighted to get home to her own comforts, and we were delighted to have her home.
One thing we really didn't expect after my hip surgery was for me to contract MRSA. MRSA is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, and because it's methicillin-resistant, a lot of medicines can't be used to treat it.
I noticed that she was quite red in the face, and she had a rash, and I just knew there was something up, even though she was denying it. I contacted the hospital then, so they told me, advised me to take her up to outpatients the next morning. They ordered some tests, and she had chest x-ray and bloods done, and there was some very obvious signs of inflammation and infection, but the problem was they didn't know where it was coming from.
I was in isolation for 6 weeks. It was very scary watching the nurses and doctors coming in wearing their plastic aprons and putting on gloves and disinfecting themselves before they left. I felt like I was an alien.
She was brought to theatre and they took a sample from the hip joint, and that was sent off to the lab. So the following day then there was quite a commotion anyway, that the infectious disease team came in to tell us that she had MRSA in her hip joint. So from there on then that we were in the hospital then for probably another 5 weeks. She was on IV antibiotics, and she had to go back to theatre, have the wound completely opened up and it all washed out, and so she was very, very uncomfortable at that stage.
Because the doctors kept changing the medications and they weren't sure which antibiotics were working, it was very scary for me and my parents and my family. And I just was in despair, like I didn't know when I was ever going to get out of that little room. While I was in hospital for the second time and they were trying to figure out what my infection was, they were running a load of tests before they found out I had the MRSA. So they did a chest x-ray, and that was when one of the doctors was like, "Oh, you do know you have scoliosis?" And we were like, "No." Had no idea.
It was mentioned to us as if we almost should have known about it, but it came as a complete shock. We obviously weren't expecting to hear that. She showed no signs, no pain, absolutely no discomfort, no signs of it at all.
Scoliosis is a curvature of the spine. I was diagnosed in February of 2015. We learned that I had 2 curves in my spine.
She was put on a waiting list and it was really a nightmare. The Blackrock Clinic couldn't put her on the operation list until she was 14. The curve was getting worse and worse and worse.
The first curve was in the high 80s, almost 90 degrees by the time I had surgery, and the second one was 60 or 70.
I just got a little bit emotional, and I tried to hide it from her because she's so brave, and she came and put her arm around me and she said, "Mom, don't worry, it's going to be fine." And that was, from then on, it was, yeah, okay, it'll be fine. She said it's going to be fine, so she was as much as saying to me, "I'll cope." She's so strong, and she was letting me know that she would cope if I would cope, so we did.
The surgery was successful, where they managed to reduce both of the curves to a point where they balanced each other out. They placed 2 rods and 23 screws into my back. In the space of 8 hours, I grew 2 inches, where they managed to straighten out the curves. When I was diagnosed with scoliosis, my consultant recommended a swimming group called Straight to Swimming. They're based in the Curragh military camp. Straight to Swimming was great for me because I love swimming anyway, but what really helped was the people. I felt sort of lost at school, where I would say, "Oh, I have a pain in my back," and someone would be like, "Oh yeah, same." But it's not really the same thing. And when I went to Straight to Swimming and met people who were just like me, it really helped to kind of understand each other and what we were going through. Through Straight to Swimming, I made many great friends, and some of us even got to have an amazing life experience together. We were approached by Kilimanjaro achievers down in the Curragh, and they were looking for a group of teenagers to take and train to go to Africa. Initially, I couldn't even imagine how that would ever happen. Just like anyone, I was just like, oh, if I am going to do this, I'm just going to have to train.
When we heard about this trip, it was just absolute excitement, and I know I should have been really worried, and I did worry when she was there, but on the lead up to it, both myself and Pete, we just felt this is exactly what she needs. It's just something completely different to plan for, to instead of waiting for hospital admissions and waiting for phone calls from medical secretaries like we've spent the last few years doing, just to have something to look forward to and something really positive to aim for her.
I decided I was up for the challenge and was going to go to Tanzania. We started training all over the hills and mountains of Ireland. Most of our training took place in Glendalough, actually. There's a lot of different routes around Glendalough that are challenging and resemble the type of climbing that we'd be doing when we got there. After 6 months of training, the time finally came for us to leave, and in August 2018 we all gathered at the airport and said goodbyes and left to go to Tanzania. I was emotional having to leave my family because I'd never been away from home. I've never been to the Gaeltacht, so it was a big change to have to leave for so long.
It was mixed emotions at the airport because, I know that I was so used to kissing her goodbye at the theatre door. I'm not being dramatic, but that's basically when I used to say goodbye to her, and so it was amazing to be saying goodbye to her when she was going to do something really positive.
On the first few days of the climb, we were walking through a forest, and then it kind of went on to a kind of deserty, barren landscape. It was very exciting. We could kind of see in the distance that we were getting closer to the base of the mountain. As we got closer to the mountain and eventually started climbing the mountain, it got more daunting as the terrain got tougher and the environment got tougher.
Up until they got to a certain stage, she used to be able to text us. So we'd get a text daily, and then once they started to climb higher and higher, then we got a generic text from one of the team leaders,
Every night we would sing a song before we went to sleep, and every morning we would stretch and then sing another song. We had a meeting in the big communal tent the night before we summited. They told us all about how we were going to be getting up at 12 o'clock midnight and starting to walk until the sun rose. In the night it was very hard to stay motivated. It was extremely cold. The porters kept us going because they knew that it wasn't too good if we stopped for too long. As the sun began to rise and we were told that we were getting closer and closer to the summit, then the excitement really kicked in. Everything was worth it now, and then when we got to the summit, it was just the most amazing feeling ever to accomplish something like that. We were all excited and we're hugging each other and we took loads of pictures. Then we had to get down kind of quick. It took us 6 days to get up the mountain, but then it only took us 2 days to get down. At the time, it didn't really sink in what I had just done, and I was just so overwhelmed.
We were just dying to see her. Of course, the flight was delayed, and it was one of these early morning flights, so I think we were up in the airport at 5 o'clock or something, and we were a couple of hours waiting for her to come in, and it just was like an eternity. When the group arrived into arrivals, they looked like they were troops coming home from war.
When I finally got home, I was so excited to see my parents. When they heard the stories that I had, they couldn't believe what I'd just been through, and they were very proud. Now, looking back on it, I can really see how much of a great opportunity it was, especially because of the tough few years that I had. I suppose you never really know what's going to happen, but there's no point in worrying about future problems either.
I suppose over the years, again, not trying to be dramatic, but it seemed as if every time she got up on her feet, something else happened, and she never gave up.
I think the main thing I've learned from all of this is if you put your mind to it, you can do anything.
She carried on regardless, and she's just, a very resilient young lady, and very strong, and we're in awe of her, really.
I don't like to dwell too much on the past or feel too sorry for myself. I think it's important to look forward to what's coming in the future.